Live from WCVB Channel 5 Boston, with our partners the Boston Globe, UMass, and Western Mass News. This is a Commitment 2018 special, the Massachusetts U.S. Senate debate. And now, tonight's moderator, News Center 5's Ed Harding.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the final debate in the race for U.S. Senate here in Massachusetts. Election day is 1 week from today, and we have two candidates with us tonight. Incumbent Democrat Elizabeth Warren is hoping to be elected to a second term, and fighting to unseat her is Republican challenger State Representative Geoff Diehl. So thank you both for being here with us tonight. Here are the rules. Let me go through the rules pretty quickly so you can understand exactly what we're facing in the next hour. Two panelists will ask the majority of the questions. Meet Victoria McGrange. She's a political reporter for the Boston Globe. And my on the record WCVB co-anchor Janet Wu is here with us as well. She'll be asking questions too. Tonight's debate, by the way, is also being broadcast with Spanish secondary audio. Candidate response times, 90 seconds. You'll each get 90 seconds, and then there will be a 45-second rebuttal. And if it warrants, we'll continue the conversation on. So don't be shy about entering into more. We will have speed rounds to interrupt the pacing of the show. They're real quick questions, quick answers. A coin toss determine the order of things tonight. Senator Warren begins with 45 seconds. You have an opening statement, Senator.
Thank you very much. I'm so happy to be here. 6 years ago, I asked the people of Massachusetts to take a chance on someone who had never run for public office before. You did, and I promised that I would fight to protect health care, that I would fight for our students, that I would fight for our working families, that I would fight for our seniors, and that's what I've tried to do every single day. My opponent, Mr. Diehl, says that he wants to be the deciding vote to roll back health care. He's also embraced a tax plan that his Republican colleagues say they're going to pay for by cutting Social Security. And Mr. Diehl says he wants to be with Donald Trump 100% of the time. Me, I want to be with the people of Massachusetts 100% of the time.
Senator Elizabeth Warren. Representative Diehl, your opening statement, sir.
Thank you, Ed. My opponent wants you to believe that your tax cut in this robust economy is somehow rigged for wealthy millionaires. But the fact is, 80% of Massachusetts families have benefited from tax reform. My opponent also wants you to believe that open borders, sanctuary cities, and the abolishment of ICE won't put your families at risk. But the fact is, her immigration ideas encourage drug trafficking, human trafficking, and MS-13 gang violence. As the election approaches, Elizabeth Warren desperately wants you to believe that her focus is on Massachusetts. But the fact is, she doesn't care about your house. She cares about the White House. Unlike Elizabeth Warren, I want this job. I want to be your full-time voice in Washington. Thank you.
Opening statements are out. Janet Wu begins our questioning. Janet.
Representative Diehl, 3 funerals were held today for some of the 11 victims killed in the synagogue shooting in Pittsburgh. Last week, pipe bombs were sent to Democratic political leaders and supporters. All of these incidents were fueled by hate. Critics accuse President Trump of inciting this rage. Does the president bear any responsibility?
Look, Janet, pockets of deep-seated hatred and mental health issues, I think, drove this tragedy, this atrocity, really. And I'll tell you that I think the discourse in Washington has failed us. I think that political leaders have taken us off the wrong path and have obviously pushed people who are unbalanced to do pretty despicable things. It's not helped when people like my opponent, Senator Warren, use language when, for example, a year ago, health care was being debated by saying that Republicans want, and this is a quote, blood money from the American people, at a time when Congressman Scalise had been shot by a Bernie Sanders supporter. It doesn't help when she makes comments or jokes about how Republican bodies should be cut open. That's the kind of rhetoric and dialogue that pushes people in the wrong way. It was a Cambridge supporter of hers who put a $500 bounty on an ICE officer. That's the kind of rhetoric we don't need, encouraging this awful, awful tragedies that we have to deal with now.
Senator Warren.
So thank you for the question. You know, I think we should start by saying that our hearts all go out to those the families of those who were killed and to the Jewish community, not just in Pittsburgh, but all across this country. This is a time when we have leadership that's trying to turn Americans against Americans. That's not who we are. Ultimately, the responsibility for the person who commits the violence lies with the person who commits the violence. But Donald Trump is not making things better when he does attacks on the free press, when he tries to turn people against people. Mr. Diehl has said he's going to have Donald Trump's back 100% of the time. And I just want to remind people in this context what that means. When Donald Trump said that Mexican immigrants were rapists and drug dealers, Mr. Diehl stood by. When the Access Hollywood tapes came out, Mr. Diehl stood by. When Donald Trump put a Muslim ban in place, Mr. Diehl stood by. When Charlottesville occurred and Donald Trump called white nationalists fine people, Mr. Diehl actually agreed. When Donald Trump referred to shithole countries like Haiti and El Salvador and Africa, Mr. Diehl stood by. When Donald Trump tries to define transgender out of existence, Mr. Diehl stands by. When Donald Trump calls himself a nationalist, Mr. Diehl stands by. That is not leadership. That is not going to make us a stronger America.
Representative Diehl, do you have a rebuttal?
Senator Warren, you are obsessed with Donald Trump, but maybe that's because you're fixated on the White House. Let me tell you what's disgusting. Disgusting is protesting down in Washington, arm in arm with Linda Sarsour, a noted anti-Semite, anti-American, and pro-Sharia law advocate. That is not leadership down in Washington.
Senator, would you care to respond at all?
Look, I think that anti-Semitism is fundamentally wrong. And it's one of the reasons that I am so deeply disturbed about this shooting and so deeply disturbed that we are now in America that makes an attack on people because of their religious beliefs. I think that we will fight back against that by standing up against this kind of bigotry. Geoff Diehl has said he will have Donald Trump's back 100% of the time. And we've seen the examples of exactly what that means. He has Donald Trump's back no matter how ugly that is.
Representative Diehl, I want to give you one last chance. One more response, if you care.
Look, Senator Warren wants to make this race about her and Donald Trump. The fact of the matter is, I'm running for U.S. Senate in this state, not Donald Trump.
Victoria McGrain from The Globe has our second question.
Thanks, Ed. In your first year as Senator Warren, Congress was unable to tighten gun control laws even after the murders of 20 children in Newtown, Connecticut. Tell voters what you can deliver on in your second term, if you were to get one, considering Washington remains divided.
Statistically speaking, 8 children died today from gun violence, and 8 more will die tomorrow, and 8 the day after that, while Congress can do nothing, because Congress is held hostage by the NRA. So for me, what this is about fighting back against the NRA. Now, the NRA has endorsed Geoff Diehl. I think that's wrong. I think what we have to do is have some compromise. I'm willing to compromise. I voted in favor of a compromise position. But right now, the NRA won't permit it. And you know, the extraordinary lengths to which they've gone. The NRA will not permit us now in Congress to vote on things that most of America agrees on, strengthening background checks, deciding that terrorists should not be able to buy guns, no fly, no buy, bump stocks. We've got things that we could do in Washington to help make all of our kids safer. But we've got to have the courage to stand up and do it. What will I do? I want to answer your question. I will stay in this fight. I have been in this fight from the beginning. And I'll tell you something else. I try to get in more and more people who are allies so that we can keep our kids safe. I'm not down in Washington to work for the NRA. I'm down in Washington to work for the people of Massachusetts.
Representative Diehl, you have been endorsed by the NRA. Are any changes needed to federal law?
Well, first of all, law-abiding gun owners are not the problem. In fact, in Massachusetts, we've done a pretty effective job of having gun laws that have prevented a lot of the tragedies we've heard nationwide. We do have problems with people coming into our country illegally, however, and with Senator Warren's open borders and getting rid of ICE, getting rid of the agency that would work to get rid of people who are here illegally committing crimes, and we know with the ICE with the MS-13 gang members that have been arrested here in Boston. 61 members were rounded up last year. It was rape. It was murder. These people are preying on an immigrant community, and they need to be identified and deported. If it were up to Elizabeth Warren, they would be out of here. You know, I actually have been endorsed by a police agency that's never, a police union that's never endorsed a Republican candidate for U.S. Senate before. The Boston Patrolmen's Union. And Mike Leary, the president, is here today. The reason that Mike and I believe that his members look at me as someone who is the right candidate for this job is I believe in letting law enforcement do the jobs of making sure that those who are here illegally committing crimes, including gun crimes, are deported, and that, I think that's a big difference between myself and Senator Warren.
Senator Warren, do you have a rebuttal?
Yeah, I'd just like to point out about what that answer was. You asked, is there anything at all that ought to be changed in our federal gun laws? And Mr. Diehl's response was, let's switch this over to immigration and blame the immigrants for the problem here. Look, the fundamental question is, do we need some change in our laws? And the answer is yes, just some sensible changes in our law. But right now, the NRA says no. And having said no, Mr. Diehl has no changes, not one single change that he says that he will embrace. You know, I just want to make the point, you raised this in terms of the context of a mass shooting. We think about this again because of the synagogue.
In Pittsburgh, right.
But children are dying everywhere. They die on the sidewalks, they die in school, they die in playgrounds. All of our children are precious, and we need better gun laws to protect all of them.
So let's bring it back, Representative Diehl. Are there any changes needed to federal law?
You know, just real quick, a teenager was killed on an East Boston beach by an MS-13 gang member that was arrested about 3 weeks ago. Under Senator Warren's plan, there will be no agency that can actually identify and deport somebody who's committed that crime. When it comes to gun laws, I do have a national priority, which is making national reciprocity happen. First of all, if you live in Massachusetts and you have a driver's license, you can travel to other states using that driver's license. But if you have a Class A carry, federal ID for owning a gun, you can't go to another state using a Massachusetts ID. What I want to do is make sure that we have a uniform national gun license that takes all the best options of other states, uses some of the effective gun laws in Massachusetts so that other states like Indiana, that are a weak state when it comes to gun laws and keeping illegal guns off the streets, having that national reciprocity to me is one of the solutions.
You would have a national law, right? In other words, someone from Indiana could come into Massachusetts.
Actually, what would happen is once we decided on a national identification process, a national licensing, our laws and other states' laws would be used, replacing what Indiana has as a weak partner.
Senator, do you have a response to that?
Yeah, I do. So the reciprocity law that the NRA does approve, that has passed the House of Representatives with a Republican majority, is one that says if you can get a license down in Texas and Texas permits concealed carry, when you come to Massachusetts, you'll be able to conceal carry in Massachusetts, whether Massachusetts permits that or not. The idea that
we do allow concealed carry in Massachusetts.
The idea that someone is going to agree around the country to Massachusetts' stronger gun laws when we can't get a single bill through the United States Senate right now that has even the tiniest bit of background check or that prevents terrorists from owning guns is just, it is not sensible. It is not true that this is going to happen. What we're talking about is NRA. He says he will do whatever the NRA wants. Not me. I'm here to try to protect our children.
Will you do what the NRA wants, Representative Diehl?
I've always been an independent voice on Beacon Hill, and when I go to Washington, I'll bring a Massachusetts voice to the discussion when it comes to gun laws. Massachusetts is doing it right. We need to make sure other states come into compliance. With Senator Warren, you will have no seat at the table based on the fact that she is unable to work with the administration and with a Republican-controlled Senate, which I anticipate will be the case after the midterms.
Let's move to the discussion to a local problem that I think a lot of people are very upset about. It's projected to be just above freezing tonight in the Merrimack Valley, Representative Diehl, where more than 5,000 homes are still without gas. And it's been nearly 2 months since the explosions and fires in September. One teenager lost his life. Do you feel that natural gas is still a safe energy source for residents in 2018?
The truth is, Janet, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if gas is the issue or the pipelines are the issue. We're joined by Steve Tolman, head of the AFL-CIO of Massachusetts, someone who I've felt has been a great labor leader in Massachusetts. And I've talked to Steve about, I think the pipe fitters have brought this issue up to me as well as I've served on Beacon Hill. They're not sure if gas lines around our state are secure. And in fact, the National Grid workers that have been locked out, which is terrible, first of all, you have a National Grid, a company that's benefited from the tax reductions, that is now locked out their workers while they're getting record profits, makes 0 sense. And taking them off health care is an insult to injury as well. But when it comes to gas lines, you know, we've been told by those National Grid workers for a long time it's a safety issue. They've been saying it on the picket line as well when I've talked to them. The fact of the matter is, Lawrence and North Andover and Andover, that should have never happened. Obviously, it was an accident, but it's an accident that was bound to happen at some point. By the way, in Weymouth, there's a compressor station that's been sited in the wrong spot. There is a four-river bridge right there, fairly recently reconstructed. There is residences within a half a mile of that placement. That compressor station is just as dangerous as some of these faulty gas lines. Massachusetts and the federal government, FERC, really should be more involved in overseeing this.
Senator Warren, I got a tweet from Melissa today, and she said, "We are all facing December with no heat."
Yes.
She says that's bad. Yes, Melissa, it is bad. So I'll ask you the same question. Is natural gas a safe energy source for residents in 2018?
Well, Senator Markey and I have raised exactly the same question, and we have gotten a commitment. There's going to be a federal hearing here in Massachusetts in a couple of weeks on exactly this question. It's the question about the overall safety of natural gas and specifically what went wrong in the Merrimack Valley. How is it that this kind of event occurred that not only cost a young man his life, but put so many other lives at risk and has turned so many families and so many small businesses upside down? We also, Senator Markey and I, have been pushing so that we make sure that heating assistance has been released, federal heating assistance, so that people have that available to them. But it's also about holding these giant companies accountable. You know, they want to cut corners, only it's our families' lives that are on the line when they do that. So for me, what this is really about is getting to the bottom of what happened here, getting to the question of how safe natural gas is, and then making sure that we have representatives in government who are not there to look out for giant corporations, but who are there to look out for us. I think it's this fundamental question of who government works for. I think the Weymouth compressor station is exactly an example of that. And that is government that's paying way too much attention to big corporations and not enough to the safety and security of our families. That's what I'll fight for.
Should there be at least a temporary moratorium on new gas lines coming through Massachusetts?
I think until we know what has gone wrong, and frankly, until we get those national grid workers back on the job so that we have real experts, they're writing up safety reports every day. We've heard about these safety reports. Multiple safety reports have been filed, and that's a serious problem. Safety reports mean someone is in danger potentially.
Janet,
Representative, do you back a temporary moratorium?
Yeah, you know, Janet, it's easy to say let's just stop it. The fact of the matter is we're losing Pilgrim Nuclear Power Plant in the next year. We're about to lose 19% of our state's energy. And that's going to be hard to backfill with all the renewable energies. I'm all for the wind, the solar, the hydro that we're bringing into the state, okay? But you can't build enough solar installations on the houses in this state to replace 19% of energy. And we are, thankfully, we just passed recent legislation on Beacon Hill to expand the wind power off of off our shores, which is great. But at the same time, you need to have all energies options on the table. And in my opinion, just saying no gas at all is the wrong way to go. We just need to make sure those companies are reinvesting when they're making record profits.
Let's move on to another local concern. Senator Warren, traffic congestion is one of the most stressful factors of daily life for most Massachusetts workers, and it's only getting worse. Despite the mess that was the big dig and the $14 billion that was spent, what are you prepared to do in Washington to help us with our traffic woes?
So this is the fundamental question about who government works for. The Republicans passed a giant tax giveaway, $1.5 trillion that went to billionaires and giant corporations. And what's happened to federal help for infrastructure? Where's all that new money that was promised for infrastructure that would help us in building more roads, that would help us in building more mass transit, that would help us in dealing with our traffic congestion? Where is it? It's all gone to the billionaires and the giant corporations. And that's what happens when you've got a Congress, when you've got a White House that want to just work for the billionaires and the giant corporations. So here's what I think. Right now, just take a look. The Trump administration said they would do $1 trillion in infrastructure. Only here's the trick. $4 out of $5 have to actually come from the locality. And then where's the fifth dollar going to come from in the federal government with debts rising? The answer from the Trump administration is, oh, we'll take it away from other money that we're already giving to the states and the cities. Look, I think the federal government doesn't have the answer to everything, not by a long shot. But they can be a good partner. They can be a good partner in investing in infrastructure to deal with traffic, to deal with sewers, to deal with water, to deal with communication in Western Mass. We just need to make government work for the people instead of for billionaires and giant corporations.
Senator, what would you do to help alleviate the problem?
Well, part of what I would do is say that we shouldn't be giving that money away to billionaires and giant corporations. We need to roll back some of that, and we need to put that money into investments for building a future. The federal government should be a good partner. It should be up to Massachusetts to make the decision. Here's where we want the roads. Here's where we want to invest in mass transit. But they need help. They need money from the federal government. And the only way that happens is if we actually have money at the federal government. The debt has gone up by 17% since this new tax bill has gone in, and it's going to go up by more. And the Republicans say they're going to pay for it by cutting Social Security. That's not government that's going to help us get better and build a future.
Representative Diehl, what would you do to help to alleviate the traffic problem?
Well, I just want to talk about billionaires for a second, because my opponent wants you to believe, and she said this for a long time, that she's all for the little guy. But back in 2009, when the economy was down and Harvard wanted to cut costs by firing 275 low-level employees, they asked for high-paid professors like Elizabeth Warren to take a pay cut to save those jobs. She refused, and janitors and service workers ultimately were fired. So let's not talk about who's the champion for the little guy when the only millionaire in this room with a mansion is you, Senator Warren. When it comes to transportation, I certainly know that government needs to be a partner, but at the same time, government needs to be held accountable. When I led the repeal of the index gas tax in 2014, we saw that Massachusetts was spending 50% of the gas tax going to the MBTA, which had $6 billion of deferred maintenance. $6 billion in deferred maintenance. Okay? So when the T shut down in February of 2015, it was no surprise with switchgear and tracks and equipment, cars that were as old as I am, I'm 50 now, really failing. There should have been an investment back in, but it wasn't happening. And the other 50% of the gas tax in Massachusetts was funding road construction at a cost of $675,000 per year per mile. Okay, that number's pretty big. The national average is $145,000 per year per mile. Massachusetts could have done better if government's more efficient. The revenue can be there to get the projects done.
Senator Warren, I want to give you, he mentioned you and your financial status. I want to give you a chance to answer that.
So look, I have no idea what he's talking about 2009, but I will tell you this. I put 10 years of my tax returns out online. Anybody can look through them. They can see exactly what I have and what I don't have. Mr. Diehl has put exactly the same number of tax returns online as Donald Trump. 0. So you want to talk about people's financial dealings or financial status? You got to actually put it out there. You got to put your tax returns online so everybody can see it. I think that's what it means to be a public servant.
Mr. Diehl, do you have a response to that?
Sure. For 8 years, I've filed what's required for the state as far as financial disclosures. And for the Senate run, I had to file Senate ethics disclosures that have pretty much showed everybody what I own. I probably owe more on my house, more on the business my wife and I own together than we have in equity. But my opponent, again, wants to talk about having her taxes out there. That's great. We actually have seen that she pretty much takes advantage of every loophole so she can pay less. For the last 10 years, she's exploited a $340,000 loophole to lower her property taxes. So to be clear, she wants you to pay more for your taxes than she pays less.
I want to move on, but
come on. I take a property tax deduction and I take charitable deductions pretty much like everybody else does. And if Mr. Diehl says he's already disclosed everything, then why not put your taxes out there? I don't understand what he's hiding.
You're not going to find $50,000 in clothing deductions.
We don't know that if you don't put it out there. We don't know what we'll find if you don't put it out there for everybody to see, because that's really the point.
We've hit the lightning round. This is the first lightning round. Again, these are quick questions, quick answers. Speed round 1. Question 1 for Senator Warren. It may be the most divisive issue on the ballot. State-mandated nurse-to-patient ratios. Are you voting yes or no on question 1?
Yes.
Yes or no on question 1, Mr. Diehl? That's a no. The second question for Mr. Diehl. Ballot question 3 could undo the law that prohibits discrimination based on gender identity in public places like bathrooms. Keep the law or get rid of it?
I'm a no vote on that.
Senator Warren.
Keep the law. Vote yes on 3, no on hate.
Senator Warren, give Governor Baker a grade, please.
C.
Representative Diehl, give Governor Baker a grade, please.
I'll give him a B, and I know that the next 4 years he'll move up to the A category.
Representative Diehl, do you or your spouse own a gun?
Yes, I do.
Senator Warren, do you or your spouse own a gun?
Nope.
Senator Warren, right now, babies born in the United States to non-citizens are given U.S. citizenship, but this morning the president said he wanted to end that. Do you agree?
That's in the Constitution. The president can't end it by himself. So, no, I don't agree with the president. He doesn't get to erase parts of the Constitution that he doesn't like.
Representative Diehl.
I can actually read what's in the Constitution here, but because it's a short round, yes, we do need to follow the Constitution, which does not call for providing citizenship to those who are not here as national citizens.
This is the end.
And the children thereof.
That's the end of the lightning round. We'll move on to the questions. Victoria.
Continuing on with immigration, Representative Diehl, with a caravan of thousands of Central Americans making its way to our southern border, President Trump wants a blanket ban on people entering the United States, asylum seekers and children included. Should there be another standard for victims of a humanitarian crisis who want to enter the U.S.?
Well, we already have, refugee status that we allow people in. Now, one of the problems, unfortunately, with the refugee status is it has been abused. We saw it with the Tsarnaev brothers, and I know Mayor Walsh is here. He was serving with me in the legislature. I don't think we ever want to see another tragedy in Boston happen where people were here saying they were refugees, but flying back and forth to Chechnya, being radicalized, and ultimately committed that atrocity. We are a country of immigrants. I love the fact that people want to come to our country. My last name's Diehl. I wasn't here originally when this country started, but the fact of the matter is we've got to follow the laws that are set out for immigration. And I'm sorry. And
I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
No. And so I think that refugee status, of course, we want to provide for those people who are fleeing terror and oppression. But at the same time, there are people that are coming across the border illegally. We need to end that as well.
So do you agree or disagree with President Trump's blanket ban closing the border to this particular caravan of asylum seekers?
Well, I think this caravan obviously is making its way to attempt to illegally cross in. Whether or not the entire group is refugees is hard to determine at this point. I think what probably should happen is an effort to send judges down there and send personnel down there so that when they do come, we're able to expedite whether or not they are coming here legitimately as a refugee or are they just trying to come in illegally.
Senator Warren, the same question.
So we are a nation of laws, and we need to enforce our laws. And we need comprehensive immigration reform. I mean, that's the much larger picture here. I voted in 2013 for comprehensive immigration reform. It was bipartisan. It had a path to citizenship for those who were here who were not documented. It had a path to citizenship for our dreamers, protection for people with temporary protective status, cleaned up our visa system, and yes, had much more money for border security. It was a compromise. Ultimately, the Republicans blocked it. But understand a big part of why this problem is here right now. This has to do with Donald Trump's failed foreign policy overall. He has hollowed out the State Department and he has cut aid to Central America. That means that the gangs are more powerful than ever. And so that means more people are fleeing the violence. Right now, we need a State Department, we need diplomatic tools, we need economic tools to be helping the countries in Central America to make sure that they've got some law enforcement so that the people are safe to be there. That's what prevents this kind of caravan that we're talking about now. We need to make the investment up front, not to engage in the kind of chaos that he's engaged in at the foreign policy level and the hollowing out of our State Department. It does not make us safer, it does not make us stronger, and it does not fit with our values.
Mr. Diehl, do you have anything else you'd like to offer in this round?
You know, we've been able to successfully renegotiate a trade deal with Canada, with Mexico. We're looking to have Mexico be an economic partner and growth for the future. We don't want to have economic chaos, but part of the problem down in Mexico, and I've been there, I went to El Paso, I traveled an hour east to Fort Hancock. I've seen the city of Juarez ravaged by drug cartels that are running the border, all the cities on the border. We're seeing murder, we're seeing human trafficking, and drugs are making their way into Massachusetts. In Lawrence, I know we've got the mayor of Lawrence here. We know that enough fentanyl was seized a few weeks ago to kill half the population of Massachusetts. And I want to make sure I'm a partner in stopping that. That's why having the support of law enforcement, making sure that we complete the border, have a secure border so that there is no temptation to bring those drugs in, doesn't feed the drug cartels that are ravaging Mexico and southern countries as well.
Senator Warren, another foreign policy question. Relations with Saudi Arabia are hanging by a thread with the murder of a Washington Post journalist, but is blocking an arms deal that is worth billions of dollars to Raytheon, a Massachusetts company, and putting thousands of jobs on the line worth the sacrifice in order to make a statement to the rest of the world?
So I want to start with a little context around this. The person who was killed was not just a random person. It was a member of the press. And the reason that he was killed by Saudi Arabia is because he asked hard questions. And that's a problem worldwide. Dictatorships don't like people who ask hard questions. Authoritarians don't like people who ask hard questions. And when the Saudis killed him, they sent a message to the rest of the world. No one shall ask them hard questions. That means that it is up to the rest of the world to respond, not just the United States alone, but the whole world. All countries that are trying to support democracy, all countries that believe that leaders should be held accountable, that governments should be accountable to the people, not just to the powerful. All of them need to make a response to Saudi Arabia. We need a comprehensive, integrated response that is multinational, not just to have this fall on one company or one state or one group of workers. We need something that works for all of us. And right now, the Trump administration is not trying to put anything together. Instead, has been backpedaling, trying to find ways to let the Saudis off the hook. If Donald Trump lets the Saudis off the hook, doesn't put together an international coalition, then he is declaring that for any country, any dictator who doesn't like the tough questions asked by the press, they can take steps to shut it down.
So the arms deal should be blocked, should be pulled?
So my point is we need to do this together. We need an international response.
But you're not saying whether the arms deal should be pulled at this point?
It could be part of it. The point is an international response. This is not an affront just to the United States of America. We should be leading the nations of the world to say that a free press is part of how democracy works. It's part of the accountability in the system.
Representative Diehl, what's your take on this?
Look, we've got companies in Massachusetts like Raytheon that benefit from arms contracts around the globe. And whether they have contracts with Saudi Arabia or not, that should not play a factor into what's going on. Saudi Arabia has acted in a horrible manner in this case, and they should be held accountable by the United States and by other countries that want to see journalism kept free, the questions allowed to be asked, even if they are tough questions to leaders in different countries. But the other fact of the matter is Saudi Arabia is also a partner in trying to prevent terrorism in the region. Israel, one of our strongest partners in the world, is so close by, and they are one of our strong allies. To have Saudi Arabia trying to keep terrorism in Yemen at check and other regions nearby at check, I think we need to hopefully get back to a relationship that allows them to be a partner with us for the future, but never let an atrocity like this happen again. And
what about the arms deal? Should it be pulled or not?
Look, if it looks like the leadership of the country either committed this act or approved of this act being committed and they don't change leadership, then we have to, I think we need to make some statement, and pulling that deal may be one of the ways to signal that.
Representative Diehl, Washington State next week will vote on a referendum that would impose a carbon fee, charging polluters for the right to emit carbon dioxide and greenhouse gases. Is this a good idea?
Look, I don't necessarily believe in a carbon tax. I do believe that Massachusetts has been doing an incredibly great job of committing to renewables and renewable energy. But at the same time, we're also part of a regional greenhouse emissions, the RGGI agreements that also keep polluters in our state, in our region, from abusing the system. I don't necessarily see a carbon tax as the way to go forward with this. I mean, the fact is we have been fighting the effects of global warming in our state pretty effectively, but we still have some ways to go. One of the things that we have that's affecting us is warmer waters hitting our shores, and what we're seeing is, just as an offshoot of that, the fishing industry, having invasive species coming into the regular catch and cutting their ability to bring in the fish that they're hoping to bring to market. And so they're looking for some help with trying to keep the environment, in a healthier state. I just don't think that the carbon tax is the way to go. I think that we've been able to successfully, as a state, commit to energy resources that are renewable, and that regional greenhouse gas emission for our region perhaps should be used elsewhere.
Senator Warren, what do you think about a carbon tax?
So I don't know the particulars of the Washington bill, but I'll say this: polluters ought to pay for their pollution, because believe me, the rest of us pay for it. Our children pay for it with elevated asthma rates. The rest of us are paying for it with the climate change that we are beginning to see and that we are all going to pay for. I think this is, again, comes back to this question about who you think government is supposed to work for. Right now, the Environmental Protection Agency in the Trump administration is run by a coal lobbyist. And under the Environmental Protection Agency and the Trump administration, the cleanup in the Housatonic River, that GE had dragged its feet and dragged its feet and dragged its feet for years, finally had come to an agreement. Not an entirely satisfactory agreement for the people who live there, but something. Donald Trump gets elected, they put Scott Pruitt in at the EPA, and all of a sudden, all bets are off. And now GE's saying, well, they don't really want to have to ship the bad stuff out of state, that they want to let, GE work out something that works well for their profits. And that's the fundamental question. Who do you think government ought to work for? I think it ought to work for our kids. I think it ought to work for people who want to breathe the air and drink the water. I don't think it ought to just work for big oil, for big coal, for the giant companies that want to lay waste to our rivers, to our water, to our air, and then make everyone else pick up the tab.
Mr. Diehl, do you have anything else you'd like to offer?
The private sector has a place in this too. Look, I'm an Eagle Scout. I want to make sure that we leave the campground better than we found it, as far as globally. But the other thing too is, look at the casino being developed in Everett. They actually undertook a huge reclamation of the shores right off the casino there. That was a great way for public and private to work together to get this done. So I think that we can find ways where the private sector is a partner as well.
Senator, you released your DNA test a couple of weeks ago following years of taunting by some of your critics. A new Suffolk University Boston Globe poll found voters are split on whether you should have taken and released the DNA test to prove your Native American heritage. Do you regret releasing those results?
Look, this is just who I am. I've put 10 years of tax returns out there. I've put all of my employment records out there. And yeah, I took a DNA test. I am an open book, and it's all on the internet. Anybody who can look at it who wants to. Because I believe that at the end of the day, this isn't about my family. This is about families all across Massachusetts. Families who've been getting the wrong end of the stick over and over and over. I am in this fight for students who are getting crushed by student loan debt. I'm in this fight for every family who's come up to me in one of my 37 town halls to say, please hold on to health care for all of us. I'm in this fight for every person who's collecting Social Security while the Republicans are saying, you know how we're going to pay for that giant tax break to billionaires and giant corporations? We're going to pay for it by cutting Social Security and Medicare. Look, Washington works great. It works great for billionaires. It works great for giant corporations. It's just not working for families, and that's the reason I'm in this fight.
Representative Diehl, should Senator Warren's heritage matter?
I've said this to Senator Warren in one of our previous debates. I've said it on my campaign from the day I started. I don't care about her ancestry. That's between her and her family. It's about integrity. And it's not that she may or may not have benefited from getting a job by listing herself in a national directory as Native American, but the fact is she tried to benefit from that. And look, I don't care what percentage she is, I just want people to know I am 100% focused on Massachusetts.
You said you tried to benefit. Is this discharge?
This is, the Boston Globe did an extensive study. The idea that he still tries to say, well, there's an open question, that's a question of integrity, trying to make up facts. In fact, it's exactly what Donald Trump does, and you're just doing Donald Trump's work for him. Look, I put everything out there. It's there. People can look at it. They can look at it on the internet. Because this really isn't about my family. This is about families across this Commonwealth. This is about a man who wants to go to Washington and be the deciding vote to take away health care. This is about a man who wants to go strengthen a party that says that the way they're going to pay for tax breaks for billionaires is to cut Social Security. This is about a man who supports an environmental protection agency that says, let's run it by a coal lobbyist.
She's made these claims a few times tonight. I would like to give you an opportunity to respond to that.
Far afield from the original question, so maybe I can. She mentioned high cost of college. My opponent claims she cares about the high cost of college, but she grabbed $350,000 to teach one course at Harvard. And by the way, students there were forced to buy her book, which also allowed her to collect an additional $200,000 in royalty fees. So she's certainly benefiting. And again, the only millionaire in this race is her.
All right, we're at speed round 2. Again, quick questions, quick answers. Here we go. We begin with you, Representative Diehl. Do you believe that climate change is man-made?
I believe men and women have an effect on the climate, yes.
Senator?
Yes.
Senator Warren, question 2. Will you serve your full term if you are elected next Tuesday?
So I've already said that I will take a look at running for president after the election, but I guarantee this, no matter what I do, I will work for the people of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
Will you serve the full term as United States? Representative Diehl.
Yes, the answer for me is yes, but since she got a few extra words in there, ironically, my opponent and President Trump do have something in common. Neither wants to be senator from Massachusetts, but both want to be president.
So Representative Diehl, name someone in the opponent's party that you would like to work with.
Well, I think Senator Markey, right off the bat, is somebody that would be a partner for me. Steve Lynch has been my congressman for a long time. I respect
Senator Warren, and name someone in the opponent's party that you would like to work with.
Well, can I just say, since Donald Trump has been sworn in, I've gotten more than a dozen proposals passed on a bipartisan basis and signed into law by Donald Trump. So I got more than a dozen people right there, not just that I'd like to work with,
but I have. So is Donald Trump the one in the other party you'd like to work with?
He's signed off on my proposals, and that makes me happy when he does.
Senator Warren, say something nice about Representative Diehl.
He was an Eagle Scout. I think that's terrific.
Representative Diehl, say something nice about the senator, please.
Well, look, I think that the senator has a lot of passion in what she's doing, and I appreciate her time in office.
Representative Diehl, what's the last book you read?
Green Eggs and Ham to third graders in a school on Dr. Seuss Day.
Senator Warren, what's the last book you read?
Good and Mad, and I'm in the middle of The Matchmaker right now.
Wonderful. This is the end of the lightning round. Victoria.
Representative Diehl, you've praised the Republican-passed tax cuts as a boost to the Massachusetts economy. The law also swelled the national deficit by $113 billion. Do deficits matter?
They do, big time. First of all, Massachusetts is enjoying record unemployment. We are down below the national average of, I believe, 3.6%, which is the lowest it's been in 50 years. We have seen GDP recently at, I believe, over 3.3%, following a 4.1% GDP, so the best back-to-back quarters in I don't know if it was a decade or something like that. But the fact of the matter is more people in Massachusetts are making money. They are having wage increases, and that is translated into Beacon Hill taking in over $1.2 billion in unanticipated tax revenue because of all the people out there working. Companies have been able to reinvest. But Republicans and Democrats share in the blame down in Washington of spending more than we take in. My wife and I own a small business. We put our life savings into it to start it. We've been at it for about 17 years, and we never would have made it if we followed Congress' model of spending more than we took in. But we, you know, as a country, I think have to look at what we're spending as well as what we're taking in. But we are taking in record tax revenue in Washington as well.
Senator Warren, what have you done to create jobs here in Massachusetts?
Well, the main thing that I've done to create jobs is try to help make the investment right here in Massachusetts in working families. And I'll give you some examples around that. I've helped with the investments in infrastructure. Everything from the big projects like dredging Boston Harbor to the 7 bridges out in Lowell, to the seawalls in Situate, to more than $100 million in grants for our firefighters for safety equipment. That's money that goes right into our economy here in Massachusetts. A second way I've done it is a year ago when Donald Trump announced his first budget, he said he was going to cut investment in medical research by $1.4 billion. That hits us really hard in Massachusetts because we do a lot of that work. I thought, man, that is it. I rounded up a bunch of senators and we pushed back, and what ended up was not only did they roll back that cut, we ended up with $2 billion in additional money invested in medical research right here in Massachusetts. Those are the kinds of things that help produce jobs right here in Massachusetts. The third thing that I've worked on generally has been in the area of education. I've managed to help 4,500 young people here in Massachusetts get rid of their student loan debt when they got cheated by for-profit colleges. That helps them go to work, it helps them go to school without being crushed by student loans.
Representative Diehl, do you have anything else you'd like to add at this topic?
Sure. Well, look, first of all, you know, my wife and I created a few jobs of our own with our small business. But at the same time, I've been in the legislature for 8 years. We've had job creation bills, which I think have helped. But one of the big things I did was when we led the gas tax ballot question in 2014, we saved taxpayers $2 billion with that. And when I say taxpayers, I mean individuals, families, but also we saved businesses a lot of money, businesses that deal with transportation. Over time, I'm sure that the tax reduction on your gas tax, the accountability involved, helped create jobs as well.
Senator Warren, a debate over Me Too is front and center in America right now. You both have families. Seeing what has happened to those who have made public allegations of sexual misconduct, would you encourage your own loved ones to report an assault in a highly unfortunate situation that if it ever happened?
I think this is a very personal decision. I watched as Dr. Ford made the decision to come forward. It was obviously very painful for her in the Kavanaugh hearings. She debated it for a very long time. She gave a heartfelt testimony about what happened. I believe her. I believe her testimony. And then I watched as the President of the United States made fun of her. I watched as powerful Republican men helped one more powerful Republican man get to an even more powerful position as they closed ranks. And people stood up and said things that were just nonsense. Oh, yes, I believe Dr. Ford, but no, not really. And put someone on the Supreme Court who I think demonstrated openly in the hearing that he should not be there. I would be there for any member of my family. I have been there for friends when they have had to make the decision about whether to come forward. I can only say encouraged by support, but ultimately that is a decision each person makes. I point out to them that every time they do come forward, they make it easier for the next person and they make it harder for abusers. But ultimately, that has to be your own decision.
So you would not give them any advice as to whether they
should
go forward or not?
And explain that if you do go forward, it helps people who are in this situation in the future. It helps to call out the abusers and to change the system. But I think it's really tough. People have to make their own decisions, and I just don't think we should push on people to do it. They have to decide for themselves whether they're willing to
Representative Diehl, with your family and the love that you have for your family, would you encourage your own loved ones to report assault in a highly unfortunate situation should it ever develop?
I would. I have 2 daughters. I can't imagine something happening, but if it did, I would want them to make some sort of public record so that justice could be served in some form or fashion. At the same time, you know, the senators referenced the Kavanaugh hearings as an example of behavior that's reprehensible. And I agree. I think that unfortunately 2 lives were destroyed and the people around them, the justice and Dr. Ford, because somebody in the Senate who had information that could have been handled privately decided to hold it back for political reasons. And one other thing that really we found out recently I think is pretty unconscionable is the fact that Senator Warren was fundraising illegally using the vote on Justice Kavanaugh, the confirmation vote, to try to raise money for her campaigns. That just came out. You know, that's something that you should not be doing, first of all, when we are having a national discussion about the Supreme Court. It's trying to fundraise off it, but you did. and it turns out it's illegal.
So can I just ask
no, go ahead, please. Yeah.
a question here? I hear Mr. Diehl's statement about how wrong it was the way that Dr. Ford was treated, but I don't remember Mr. Diehl speaking up when Donald Trump made fun of her. I don't remember Mr. Diehl speaking out when the Republicans were actually ramrodding through the Kavanaugh nomination. I may have just missed it, but I don't remember it.
You know, that's because, Senator Warren, I don't look for every opportunity to try to grandstand. You know, I don't recall you responding to the mayor of Somerville making a pretty negative statement this last week. But the fact of the matter is, that was such an intense moment in our country's history as far as trying to deal with presumption of innocence, the cornerstone of our legal system. And you were willing to throw it right out the window because you were part of the Senate Democrats who were trying to score political points by using poor Dr. Ford's testimony as a way to drag down a man without any corroborating evidence.
So I don't think I quite understand the answer, because I'm looking for the times when you've called out Donald Trump, when he's made fun of someone like Dr. Ford, when he's made fun of someone who's disabled.
I would like to drill down on what Representative Diehl said. The fundraising while the vote was being taken on the Kavanaugh hearing, did you or did you not do that?
Actually, I don't know, and I don't know what the.
There has been an ethics.
Isn't there an ethics committee?
Yes, there's an ethics complaint has been filed about a fundraising.
Then I will check into it, but I don't know.
Do you have any response to that?
I don't.
Representative Diehl? All right, we'll move on to the next one. Victoria, you got the next question.
Massachusetts ranks 7th. This is to Representative Diehl. Massachusetts ranks 7th in terms of the highest average student loan debt for the class of 2017, more than $32,000 per person on average. What is your advice to current high school seniors whose families aren't wealthy enough to pay the full price tag, which goes up all the time, since little progress has been made in Washington?
Well, I would first say take a second look at schools that are paying $350,000 for somebody to teach one course. But the other thing, look, I'm facing this myself. My daughter is a junior, will be doing college tours soon. My wife and I, certainly not millionaires, but we are looking to make sure that we can send her to the best school possible, and I understand how many people in Massachusetts are facing the same dilemma. Part of the problem, I think, is student loan rates. Now, I don't think people may know this, but when the Affordable Care Act was passed, the federal government took over student loans and set the rates. So rates are one problem that the government's not helping on. But the other problem is that you've got colleges that are charging an exorbitant amount to go there. And when government is the guaranteed payer, that means there is no incentive for those universities to drive down costs. To me, the free market of competition helps drive down the cost. And the other thing, too, I would just add is that I think colleges should be rated on job placement. You know, there's so many people graduating college with degrees that I don't necessarily think are aligned with the workforce and the needs we have right now, to the point where we're providing, work visas to people from other countries to come here and take jobs that I think our kids should be lined up for. So kids getting those jobs is going to allow them to pay back those loans. And I think the economy that we have now, that Senator Warren has vowed to repeal the tax reform bill that was crumbs, I think is also helping the affordability for college as well.
Senator Warren, what's your advice to current high school seniors across the state who aren't wealthy enough to send their kids to college?
Now, this is personal for me. I grew up in a family that was a real paycheck-to-paycheck family. I always wanted to be a public school teacher. And the only way I could do that was a 4-year diploma. And we didn't have the money for me to apply to college, much less to send me off to college. It's a very twisted a bunch of steps to get there, including dropping out of school at 19 and getting married. But my chance was a $50 a semester commuter college, because I grew up in an America that was investing in college education for kids who didn't have any money but who wanted to get out there and do the work. Today, $1.5 trillion goes to billionaires and giant corporations, and the student loan debt burden is now $1.5 trillion. Not one penny of that tax break went to help our kids who are getting crushed by student loan debt. My view on this is, there are cheaper alternatives for kids. They need to do things like take a look at community colleges, state schools. But there's no state school like there was for me where you could pay for it on a part-time waitressing job. We live in an America where opportunities for the middle class are shrinking. They're growing only for those at the top. And that's what I fight back against.
Senator, I'd like to get back to you, Representative Diehl, on this topic, if you would like to, because the senator did point to you while she was talking during that conversation anyway. So if you have anything else that you would like to add to this conversation.
Well, no, I mean, look, I think that in Massachusetts, we have an education system. I know Marty Meehan, president of UMass system, is here. It's a great crowd you brought, by the way, Senator Warren.
Thank you.
The fact is, the University of Massachusetts system is doing a fantastic job of providing opportunities for our schools, aligned with the high school graduates with the curriculum they need. But at the same time, you know, private universities continue to increase their cost, and unfortunately our public school system, higher ed system, seems to try to match them with cost. I think that's not exactly the way to go.
What can be done in Washington? What can be done in Washington?
In Washington?
In Washington, what can be done?
Well, look, I think we would directly have the ability to affect rates because the federal government has taken over. Now, rates are set on obviously creditworthiness, and one of the things that I think is happening again is that with the GDP growing, with the economy growing the way it is, you've got more people that will have the income available to have good credit and send their kids to schools. But look, I think ultimately what's the real problem is that when government guarantees the loan, whether the parent or the student defaults, those colleges get that money. And I think that they need to be more accountable to what they're charging.
Senator?
So what we could do in Washington is we can reduce the student loan debt burden. And in fact, that's something I've now done. I've managed to get about $700 million put in so that we can reduce the student loan debt burden for teachers, for firefighters, for police officers, for people who want to stay in public service. Yeah, it's not nearly as much as we need, but it's something I fought for and delivered in the right direction. But look, all of this about numbers, it's about our values. The Republicans think, give $1.5 trillion away to billionaires. I think we ought to be investing that money on our young people who are trying to get an education. That's how we build a real future. I'm glad that Marty Meehan is here, but one of the problems he faces is without enough investment in public education, families and loans have to pick up too much of
Representative Diehl, we've just got like 30 seconds, then we're going to get to the closings.
There's a little bit of fairness, though, that I just want to mention here, and that is, you know, there's a selective service bill I've filed. Men in this state, about 1/3 of young men who have to register after the age of 18, between 18 and 26, they don't go on to college. It's about 1/3. So when you say the government should just provide everybody loans, you know, there's some people that don't want to use colleges as the next step. They want to get into the trades, into the unions. And I think that, you know, you can't just give away other people's money all the time. That's another fallacy about what governments, you know, should and should not do.
All right, we have reached the point for closing statements, if you would. And again, that was decided by a coin toss. So Senator Warren, would you go first, please?
I will. I just want to say I am deeply grateful to the people of Massachusetts that 6 years ago you chose me to go down to Washington to fight for your families. And I've done my very best. I promise I will keep on doing that. I hope you will vote for me and give me a chance to go down to Washington to do it again.
Representative Diehl.
On Election Day, Massachusetts voters are going to have a choice: integrity or hypocrisy. My opponent thinks you should pay a lot more in taxes, but she grabs every loophole to reduce hers. I've saved taxpayers $2 billion. Senator Warren, the obstructionist, is part of the political poison in Washington, but with me as your senator, Massachusetts will have a seat at the table. And my opponent says she cares about you, but the fact is Elizabeth Warren cares most about Elizabeth Warren. She's focused on the White House and not your house. She doesn't even want this job, but I do. Please know this. The only thing that matters to me is what matters to the people of Massachusetts. Thank you.
Our audience, I was just going to free you all. You've all been very good. Go ahead. We've been holding that back. And let me just say to
Unleash something here.
Thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching. I want to leave you with one word, please. Vote. The open enrollment, the early voting stops on Friday, and then vote 1 week from today. Vote, vote, vote. Get out and do it. Thanks for watching. Have a great night.
Thank you to the candidates and our partners, the Boston Globe, UMass, and Western Mass News.